Well, believe it or not, we're up to the letter X today for the A to Z series. I'm Pep, you're watching The Sentinel. Today I am going to talk about the house of Xerjoff, which is what the X is for, but specifically about a small sample I got of one of their fragrances, and that fragrance is called Ivory Root. Hey guys, now Ivory Root was released back in 2012 and it was part of a collection of 10 fragrances that Xerjoff released as a series, a themed series, and it was called the Join the Club series. And each fragrance is supposed to represent a club. And for instance, Ivory Root is representing the Travelling and Adventure Club. Something like 40 Knots is yachting, and More Than Words was the Artists and Poets Club. So that's the kind of thing that they were going for. So there were 10 fragrances released in that series. I think the three that I mentioned are probably the ones that I've certainly heard about before, and several of the others I hadn't. But I am talking about Ivory Root today, and this one here, straight off the bat, I would classify as a woody, spicy, possibly spicy oriental. There are not many notes officially listed. Those notes are spicy notes, basil, sandalwood, patchouli, and specifically allspice, which is used in a lot of Asian cooking, particularly Chinese cooking. But when I do spray on, I certainly get that spiciness off the bat in the opening, and there's certainly I detect pepper there, because I get when I first sniffed this close up, it was almost like sniffing some pepper off my skin. It wasn't a bad thing. It was just a very spicy opening. And it was, the first thing that popped into my head was that it was really reminiscent of the opening to Andy Tauer's Loud to Desert Marocaine. And so I think that, I also think there's got to be some coriander there, because I pick up that same note that is in number 2 by Andy Tauer. So I thought initially that this fragrance was basically going to be a Xerjoff version of that fragrance, which was released several years earlier. After the opening, it diverts to a different journey in terms of those two fragrances. For starters, very shortly after you spray this on, you get the spice, and then there is an underlying green aromatic freshness beneath that, and it's possibly the basil in this, or it could be a combination of the basil, probably even a little bit of the mint facet of patchouli, but there is certainly that, and so you get first this feeling of walking through a spice market, in some exotic location, and this is where it then starts to divert to where Andy Tauer's fragrance really was supposed to represent the Moroccan desert, the dryness of that Moroccan desert, and the dustiness, and that fragrance pretty much stays dry. It's a dry fragrance, whereas what begins to happen with this one is that it after the opening, it starts to give you a different feeling. So there's a bit more woodiness that comes through here. I certainly start to pick up a bit of the sandalwood, and it does start to get more resinous. There is certainly an amber accord here as well, but what I start to think about is rather than trekking through a dry desert, I immediately start to think about walking through some ancient, really old historic towns, you know, in this imagined exotic location, and just picking up the aromas in the air, and also going back to that freshness that's there, you know, right after the opening. You just get that impression of you know, of the occasional cool breeze coming through. So this is where it starts to change in my mind and on my skin. And it's certainly, this one does get woodier as it progresses, and ambery. I get there's almost like a nutty vanilla in here as well. The thing with this fragrance, with Ivory Root, is that when I've worn it, it's strange, because you wear it and you think, well, you know, that it's a warming scent. It starts to get quite resinous and heavier, but then every now and then you still get a bit of that opening freshness, which kind of tends to come back and really sort of lingers around for a long time, well into the dry down. And overall it is a really well done, lovely scent. So far, every time I've tried a Xerjoff, it has certainly smelled like quality ingredients are used, and it's really, really well blended. But my problem is that this, although there are differences, I just would never be able to justify having this in my wardrobe while I've got the Andy Tower fragrance. So again, I need to reiterate, they're not the same. I just get the same kind of experience wearing both of them, and you know, the Andy Tower is pretty almost faultless in my mind, and I think it works out to be also a little bit better value for money than getting a bottle of the Xerjoff. As lovely as this is, and as much of a pleasure as it was to wear it, I just wouldn't bother owning it if I had the tower, and if I didn't have the tower, well, I'd certainly go and check that out before I got the Xerjoff anyway. So performance was great. I got at least probably close to 8 to 10 hours. Those last couple of hours were very much a skin scent. I can't comment on projection, because there was a type of fragrance that I would lose at points during the day, and then occasionally I'd pick it up depending on how I was moving or how close my nose was to my skin, and there's nothing to fault there. It smells like quality, but again, it seems currently in my wardrobe it would be a bit redundant, and I don't know why you would spend the extra money on this one if you can get Loud Desert Marocaine for a little bit cheaper. So that's my take on Ivory Root from Xerjoff. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time.